teacher, me, Vijay, there may be many teachers who are attending today. As a teachers and you as a student, you are a seed, and that seed needs to be nurtured, needs to be fertilized for, or need a little good fertilizer, or need just little bit of water and little bit of caring. And every seed has a chance to grow into a big plant. And that's what I see in my students. One of them is Gaurang. That every person has a ability to grow. And when we see our own children, our own students growing at this pace, and everybody has its own pace, and that makes us feel such a good feeling that yes, our life has not gone in vain. We have we have implanted something in our students, and that's why they are what they are today. Anyway, so thank you very much, Gaurang, for giving me a chance. And today's session is what I'm going to share with you all is my own experience in gynecology and obstetrics. So let's start with a very good definition, good, of a woman. Now, I think most of the 60% of the participants must be female. I hope so. So, what is the definition of a woman? She is a biped who micturates once a day, who defecates once a week, menstruates once a month, and parturates once a year. Now, most of my female students, most of my female colleagues are going to look at me, oh, Dr. Daksha, what are you talking? It's an uncharitable and practically not a perfect definition. But if you look at it physiologically, and mind well, this is the definition one of my gynecological professor, he was a gynecologist and a very well-known gynecologist in 1980s, 1980s, 80s and 90s. He used to say, so this is a physiological function of a female. She can hold a urine, and that's why maybe chances of urinary tract infections are more in female because the female urethra is very short. She defecates once a week because she has more chances of getting constipated. And the reason being, it could be again hormonal. So certain female hormones have a very relaxation effect on the smooth muscle fibers. And that's why you will see most of the pregnant patients say that they are constipated because it's the hormone progesterone. And constipation before menses, constipation during pregnancy, that is all because of the effect of progesterone. Menstruation once a month, that is perfectly right. And if she doesn't menstruate, then you know a whole lot of a problem that she can come up with, as Gaurang was discussing a case of amenorrhea and a patient who is not menstruating regularly. She may have infertility issues. She may have if she doesn't menstruate regularly, she may go into depression. So all that could be related to not menstruating once a month. So again, see the periodicity. As we in homeopath, we believe in periodicity. Once a day, once a week, once a month, and parturition once a year. So this was an old definition. If these are the normal physiological functions of women, if that is not been taken care of, if this is what the nature has made female to go through the same things throughout the life, if there's a stoppage to it, if there's a suppression to this function, what will happen? You see number of cases of fibroids increasing day by day. You see the number of cases of endometriosis increasing day by day. And the reason is because there is no break in the hormonal cycle. When a patient is pregnant, for 9 months, her hormonal system goes into a hyperdrive. There is high levels of estrogen, high levels of progesterone. That is what is going to maintain the pregnancy. And after delivery, again, there is a suppression of the full hypothalamic ovarian pituitary axis for another 9 months till she is lactating the child. So a female system gets a break of 9 plus almost 9 months, almost 18 months. So if that break is not given to a normal female, the chances of her developing fibroids, and that's why the fibroids are more seen either in an infertile patient or a patient with only one child. Endometriosis, more seen in patients like that. So this is a normal function of the female, and when it is not being taken care of, this is what happens. So what has gone wrong? The human body has remained the same, but the stressors have increased. Earlier, the role of a woman in a society was limited to looking after the home. But here, in today's modern scenario, the women of today are more independent. They are ambitious and they are trying to adopt a man's role in the society. They are equal in going along the men. They can be pilots, they can be doctors, they can be surgeons, they can be teachers. Whatever role a man has already taken, the female also wants to be at the same level. So there's nothing wrong about it. But our human body is not tuned to these major changes that has happened in last 50 to 60 to 70 years. 70 years back, think of your grandmother as a pilot. No, it just doesn't fit us, right? It doesn't fit into a mind that the grandmother could be a pilot, a great grandmother could be a doctor, or she's in IT. No, that doesn't fit into a mind. But now today, oh, the ladies are almost at par with the men. So what is happening? We want to be at par with men, but our system is not yet tuned to it. So we are more stressed females. We are more stressed because we have to juggle between the household duties, juggle between the professional duties. There's a lot of emotional stress, which increases the brain catecholamines, which affects the mood, which affects the behavior, which affects the hypothalamus, which affects the pituitary system, which affects the menstrual cycle. So stress can have a multifolded effects on the body. Catecholamines are the hormones which regulate the pulsatile release of gonadotropin releasing hormone. That's also like a main seat of hormone or main organ which releases the all different releasing hormones to pituitary. It gives a signal to pituitary to start secreting hormones, so that pituitary secretes hormone which controls adrenals, which controls the ovaries, and all the main centers or main functions of the body are regulated by hypothalamus. So when you are stressed, the pulsatile release of GnRH, the gonadotropin releasing hormone, is also affected. And through their effect on GnRH, the menstruation also can either cease or become disordered. And then patient can have a dysfunctional uterine bleeding. So dysfunctional uterine bleeding, by definition, when there's excessive bleeding without any palpable cause. And most likely it is psychosomatic. Most likely when a patient is going through the transition. So it is more seen at the time of puberty, or it is more seen at the time of perimenopausal period. That's a time when the hormones are really churning. Hormones are really ups and downs. The body is trying to get used to this highs and lows of the hormones, and that's when the DUB sets in. So why do you think homeopathy is the perfect answer to this? And this is what I have read in the Jeffcott's textbook of gynecology. It's not my definition. Environment can cause or encourage physical and mental ill health. Now, this environment could be just a change of job or losing a job. Nowadays, you are going to hear it in next couple of months. So many millions of people have lost their jobs. So this is going to affect their psyche if they are not going to take care of their stressful situation now. So it can affect you. Change of place, a major change of place, or people who are immigrating, they can have a lot of emotional turmoil. It can affect the physical health. Patient can have amenorrhea. Patient can have a mental ill health. They are constantly remaining in a stressful condition. The psych influences the development of organic disease in all parts of the body, and that's why the psychosomatic diseases are on rise, whether it is diabetes or whether it is stress related asthma, or nowadays we see a lot of autoimmune diseases which was unheard of earlier. We in this part of the world, especially we are in California, we see a lot of cases of rheumatoid arthritis, we see a lot of cases of lupus. So these are all autoimmune diseases. So when your body is remaining in a constant stressful condition, then these are the conditions which come up because the body just cannot deal with the stress. So this is all the definition. So illness begets anxiety. So illness, when you're ill, you remain anxious, and in turn, anxiety brings about the illness. So it's a vicious cycle, and this is all written in our gynecological textbook. So emotions, and as just mentioned, emotions and environment are two important factors in the pelvic diseases. So let's understand, how should we go about in treating in an obstetric and gynec case? Of course, the best solution and the best mode of treatment is to start with the constitutional medicine. And as you know, our constitutional medicines have not only having a physical state of mind, but even the emotional state that we consider in treating our patients. So to understand the psychology, what is the basic psychology? The basic psychological feelings are mainly the six: love, sexual feeling, joy, anger, sadness, and fear. And that's why you'll see most of our homeopathic remedies, so our constitutional, deep acting homeopathic remedies, have emotional components, and one of the six things is a important causative factor. Elements from disappointment in love, we have ignatia, natrimur, phosphoric acid, hyoscyamus. Elements from sexual feeling, suppressed sexual desire. Elements from joy, excitement, opium. Elements from suppressed anger, Staphylococcus, Nux vomica, sadness, and fear. And we have most of the homeopathic remedies will cover one of these six basic psychological feelings. So what happens if these psychological feelings are suppressed and not allowed to express in a healthier way? So suppression or blocking of one of the six basic feelings may lead to physiological changes, and that may cause the physical damage to the individual. So now coming to homeopathy, what goes in my mind when the history unfolds? We have in obstetric and gynec. Obstetric is more of an acute prescription. Obstetric is more when you are dealing with pregnancy, and constitutional remedy definitely works. If you have a constitutional remedy, then you have to keep repeating during pregnancy to have a healthy baby and healthy mother. But the challenging cases are more of a gynecological cases. They are very, very complex cases, and the causative factors can be multifactorial. So what do I do when I see a patient? Just to give an example, if it's a case of amenorrhea, as Gaurang also just discussed that case of amenorrhea. Now, when I say amenorrhea, means it's not a primary amenorrhea, where the causative factors could be genetic factors or whatever. That is difficult to treat. But when I'm talking about amenorrhea, I'm talking about a secondary amenorrhea, where the patient has had a regular period for some time, and for the last 6 months, she has stopped menstruating. That's a case of secondary amenorrhea. And mind well, it's not a physiological amenorrhea. Pregnancy is a physiological amenorrhea. Lactational amenorrhea is a physiological amenorrhea. So I'm talking about is a problem a patient is suffering from. So what could be the reason? The amenorrhea, the end result is absence of menses, but the causative factor is very, very high up. If the hypothalamic, pituitary, ovarian axis is not functioning well, then patient can have amenorrhea. So what could be the reason why the hypothalamus functions in an abrupt way, or why the hypothalamus is not functioning well? Now, what are the centers? For that, you have to understand what are the centers that is under the control of hypothalamus. So hypothalamus decides what's wrong with the body. It keeps a check of the weight gain, it keeps check of the fluid balance, it keeps check of appetite center, and then it gives signal to hypothalamus to release the hypothalamic releasing hormones. So when you see a patient of amenorrhea and she has problem with either weight gain or she's lost a lot of weight, she is maybe a case of anorexia nervosa, where compulsively a patient feels nervous by eating food. So she stops eating, she becomes very, very thin, her BMI reduces, and finally the even menstruation stops. So all this appetite center or the fluid imbalance or strong emotions, all these are controlled by hypothalamus. The next is the pituitary. Whenever there is a pituitary tumor or a hyperprolactinoma, that is a pituitary gland which enlarges and secretes a lot of prolactin hormone, that also can affect the amenorrhea. It can bring about amenorrhea. And in that case, you should get a prolactin levels done. Now, this prolactin levels could be high in a patient who is undergoing depression. This prolactin levels can be high if a patient is on under psychiatric medications, or this prolactin levels can be very, very high if she has a prolactin secreting tumor in the pituitary. So that can also affect amenorrhea. What could be the ovarian cause giving rise to amenorrhea? Either there is underproduction of estrogen progesterone, which are the female hormones, or there is an overproduction of estrogen and progesterone. Something like a luteal cyst, which is constantly secreting estrogen and progesterone. So all that see, remember, for the menstruation to happen, these hormones have to come down. There's a cyclical rise in estrogen, and after the ovulation, the progesterone also kicks in. And when this estrogen and progesterone levels drop, that is the time when the menstruation starts. So if the estrogen and progesterone levels remain very high, or if there is an ovulation, as in a case of polycystic ovarian disease, patient can have amenorrhea for months together. So that's ovarian axis. The other causes of amenorrhea could be a thyroid dysfunction, or patient who is a drug addict, or patient is extremely depressed, or a patient who has a post pill amenorrhea. That is also becoming very, very common now. So all this would affect the pituitary, hypothalamic, pituitary and ovarian axis and can bring about amenorrhea. So in most of the cases of amenorrhea, you are going to rely on a constitutional remedy. Very rarely I have used one of the specific drug for functional amenorrhea in young girls. And I can give you a tip that I've used a drug called Sinecio. That's a very good drug. When patient says that her menses are supposed to be coming, I know I'm getting all the symptoms. I'm getting cramps, I'm getting little excessive vaginal discharge, the breasts are tender. I know it's almost there, but I'm still not getting the periods. So just to bring that period in a patient otherwise who is normal, I use Sinecio in low potency, and in 60-70% of the time it brings back the menses. But that, I'm telling you, that's not the curative remedy. So the other drug that I have found very useful, as Gaurang just mentioned some time back, is folliculinum. As I was just telling, that I was going to describe folliculinum, and maybe in future lecture series we can discuss some of the cases, but today is not the time to discuss a lot of cases, because I just want to give you a little hint about how to deal with an obstetric and gynec case. So as Gaurang said, folliculinum is a good drug which is prepared from the synthetic estrogen. Is fairly known for its symptoms from ovulation to menses. So this is a drug which is to be used in the post-ovulatory phase, or let me just correct, it's a drug which has the symptoms between ovulation and menstruation. And it's a mixture, as Gaurang was also mentioning, it's a mixture of lot of remedies. So when you read this drug, you feel, oh, so many female drugs are sort of mixed in folliculinum. Again, all symptoms aggravated from ovulation to menses. All symptoms are relieved by menses, except for the specific menstrual symptoms. Something like lechesis, something like zincum, when all the symptoms are better with the start of menses. They are very, very hypersensitive. Sensitive to heat, sensitive to noise, sensitive to touch. They are better in the fresh air, like pulsatilla. So I'll just remembered one case of pulsatilla, maybe later on I can discuss. So better from fresh air. All sorts of pains are there. Drawing, burning, griping. It's also a good drug for spotting in the premenstrual period. And I've specifically found this drug very, very useful when there's a corpus luteal deficiency. So in the second half of the menstrual cycle, usually the secretion of progesterone is enough so that post-ovulatory phase remains for 14 days. But in some patients, there is a little drop in progesterone levels just before the period. And that's why these patients start spotting. So this is a very good important indication for corpus luteal deficiency, which I've used in my practice. And one of the very, very important remedies is folliculinum. And as you read, the last line says it's a wonderful drug for ovarian cyst. And as even Gaurang said, it's a very good drug for polycystic ovarian disease. It has got lot of premenstrual symptoms. And you can name all the premenstrual symptoms that you know of, and it is all there in folliculinum. Whether it's a breast symptom, they are swollen, they are painful and aggravated by touch, similar to lecaninum, similar to calcarea carb. It also is a good drug for migraines. We get a lot of patients of hormonal migraines. One of the other important remedy, apart from Natromur, is sulfur, and definitely the folliculinum. Nausea and vomiting before menses, Bovista, Pulsatilla, Veratrum, diarrhea alternating with constipation, both Pulsatilla. So I remember one good, if we have time, I can just tell you in a little short. I had a case of a patient with bad obstetric history. She had conceived once, of course, with the help of fertile, and that pregnancy resulted in missed abortion, and she had a DNC done. And after that, she had a failure to conceive. And of course, when I say it was conceived with fertile, it should immediately come to your mind that yes, maybe she had a problem with anovulation. And she was a case of polycystic ovarian disease, and she was also diagnosed with corpus luteal deficiency. So she had the chief complaint was spotting, premenstrual spotting and postmenstrual spotting. And this patient, I started with pulsatilla because she had all the symptoms of pulsatilla. So that's what I'm telling about in folliculinum. You see a mixture of lechesis, mixture of lecaninum, mixture of calcarea carb, mixture of pulsatilla and Natromur. All the female drugs. Some of the other symptoms are there in folliculinum. So I had started with the pulsatilla. She was much better. She had a lot of mental issues. She was depressed. She had a frustration. I don't recollect the exact history, but I remember I had started with pulsatilla. She was much better, but after second month of starting with pulsatilla, I thought, why not start with folliculinum? And usually I give folliculinum in infertile patient from 5th day of the menses to 15th day of the menses, just before the aggravation of the folliculinum period, that is post ovulation to menstruation. So I had started with folliculinum, and in 2 cycles of folliculinum, and third cycle she conceived, and finally she delivered a twin delivery. She had a twin babies. So I remember I had started with pulsatilla. She was responding well, but not to my satisfaction. And then I had to go for folliculinum. But of course, in that patient, I remember I used low potency of folliculinum 30. So it has got diarrhea 10 days before menses and sexual symptoms either high libido or very low libido. The mental symptoms in the premenstrual phase again would be all that you can think of. The mixture of again VP and depressed, pulsatilla, hyperactive, platina, indecisive, pulsatilla, panic attacks, natromure, huge mood swings from aggression to apathy, and unable to tolerate the noise, touch, or heat. Menstrual problems also all different types of menstrual complaints. Painful periods, prolonged or heavy bleeding, bright red bleeding with dark red clots, all sorts of cyclical problem, either too short, too long, or none at all, amenorrhea. So all that falls into the picture of folliculinum. So what do I do? So this was about the folliculinum. So again, coming back to what would I do if it's a case of menorrhagia? So we discussed about amenorrhea, about the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. And now if the problem is menorrhagia, which is again a very, very common gynecological problem, the, the, the organ which is giving rise to menorrhagia is uterus. But of course, the bigger seated problem could be hypothalamus. If she's chronically anxious, chronically stressed, or there is suppression of one of the basic psychological fears or feelings, she's going to remain in a stressful condition that can also bring about the chronic congestion in the pelvic region, and she could have one presentation of menorrhagia. So menorrhagia per se is not a disease, it's a symptom. Amenorrhea is not a disease, it's a symptom. Dysmenorrhea is not a disease, but it's just a symptom. And what is it a symptom of? It could be a symptom of various causes in gynecology. It could be a pelvic inflammatory disease. It could be a result of fibroids. It could be a psychosomatic disorder, chronic stress. It could be a manifestation of a bleeding tendency. It could be a late stage of malignancy. It could be a uterine cancer. It could be an ovarian cyst. It could be a simple local irritation like an copperty. So these are the various causes of menorrhagia. Now, without knowing what is the cause, do you think you can treat a case of menorrhagia? The drug that are you going to use in PID may be a different drug that you use in a fibroid. A drug that you use for after copperty insertion if she has a bleeding PV, the drug is different than the drug that you're going to use when there's a bleeding tendency. When you know the patient has a bleeding tendency, then you are going to think of a drug which has going to work on capillaries, which is going to work on platelets. It could be lachesis, it could be crocus, or it could be just a simple arnica in a case of a copperty insertion and she has a bleeding. So again, you are lost there. So how do I go about treating a case of menorrhagia? Determine the miasmatic diagnosis of a condition. That's the best way of going ahead. And that's how I like to do it in when I used to teach therapeutics or when I see a patient in a clinic. What is the miasmatic strongest feature of this particular patient? And try to fit in the conditions into a different miasmatic conditions. Like, is it a psoric menorrhagia? Is it a psychotic menorrhagia? Is it a tubercular, or it's a syphilitic? And the drugs will also differ. So if it's a psoric menorrhagia, the problems are more superficial. It could be just a local trauma. It's just be a case of post copper T insertion. She has a bleeding. You can think of drugs like arnica, or don't give cilicia. Sometimes I've seen cilicia can throw away the foreign bodies that is there. You don't want that copper T patients to have coming to you after a few days. Oh, doctor, you put in a copper T, but see, with the heavy bleeding, I got the copper T out. So avoid using cilicia. But yes, arnica. Is it a psychosomatic? Is she going through a lot of stress? Go through a mental history and find out if that's a constitutional picture, and if it's a perfect match for that patient. Definitely drugs could be psoric, like sulfur, like amoncarb, like bovista, like magcarb, or calicarb, or an etrumute. These are all the psoric remedies that you can think of. If it's an acute infection, a patient of acute endometritis, or acute salpingitis, or acute oophorytis, and she comes with the bleeding, then you have all the acute remedies for inflammation. And that's again starts with belladonna, or a rust ox, or it's a case of uh, apis, or a bryonia. These are all the wonderful remedies for acute inflammation. Can be anywhere in the body. It could be in the joint, it could be in the uterus, it could be in the lungs, it could be on the skin. So these are the wonderful remedies for acute infection. Find out why this patient has menorrhagia, whether she has a fibroid of the uterus. Then the drugs are different. You can look up the repertory. Metrorrhagia from fibroids, or you look up in a female chapter, tumors uterine and menorrhagia from. So these are the specific drugs are mentioned for menorrhagia from fibroids. It could be Calcarea cup, it could be Calcarea fos, it could be Medurinum, it could be Cilicia, it could be Lycopodium. There are various drugs which are near specific for uterine fibroids. Is it a case of chronic PID? There's a lot of pelvic inflammation in chronic PID. It could be following gonorrhea, it could be following an abortion. Then you can think of drugs like Cicalcor, Sabina as acute remedy, or in a chronic stage, Medorinum is sort of a near specific for chronic PID. There are very specific findings of Medorinum, and if you look up boric, very, very specific PV findings are mentioned of Medorinum. A sensitive spot near cervical loss, which is very, very peculiar. So when you start examine the patient, cervix is usually a painless organ. Only the cervix is dilated, that's the time when the patient experiences the pain. But when you are holding the cervix with a tenaculum or a valcellum, and patient complains of a pain, that could remind you that this could be a Medorinum patient. So greenish discharge, pelvic pathology, and smell of horribly smelling greenish offensive discharge. That's a sign of Medorinum patient. Gonorrhea, again, and ovarian tumors. These are all psychotic expression of menorrhagia. So the drugs will change. If it's a tubercular menorrhagia, whether it is a tuberculosis, so earlier initial stages of tuberculosis of the endometrium will bring about menorrhagia. But as the tuberculosis progresses, the tubercular infection will bring about a lot of fibrotic changes in the endometrium. And patient slowly goes into amenorrhea later on. But initially is a menorrhagia as a presentation. So you can think of drugs like phosphorus, adenomyosis, again a very good remedy, again a very good condition where the drug that you can think of is more of a tubercular and miasm. Syphilitic miasm and the menorrhagia, again the last stages of malignancy. or if there is an error in uterine development. Now, this is a very good condition for which I have used homeopathy in many of the patients. So, when there is a bicornuate uterus, or there's a septate uterus, or there's only one horn of the uterus which is developed, the other horn is not developed, that is a congenital problem, or a patient with a habitual abortions. I have used syphilinum as a very near specific remedy, and it really is a very good drug which can remove the miasmatic block. So this is how you can give a constitutional remedy in a menorrhagia patient. But if constitutional remedies are not possibly indicated, or a patient has come in acute menorrhagia, and you don't have time to sit with that patient and get a detailed history, or you are in a setup where there's a language barrier, you have very few selected signs or symptoms on which you want to prescribe, or there is absolutely paucity of symptoms, patient is just refusing to give you details of the her constitutional picture, but you still have to treat this patient. So when will you give organ remedies, and which are the organ remedies that I have found very useful in menorrhagia? Mind well, to cure menorrhagia, you have to fall back to a constitutional remedy, or you have to give intercurrent remedy. You might follow it up with nosodes or sarcodes, but when a patient comes with acute menorrhagia, you want to treat first an acute condition. And the more the patient has been treated in acute condition, she will have more faith in you for coming for a chronic conditions. So you need to manage that acute menorrhagia. So what are the different remedies that you can think of? There are many, many remedies for menorrhagia, but some of the drugs that I have found very, very useful and very less frequently used by other homeopaths are some of the drugs that I'm discussing today. The first drug is Thelespi bursa pastoris. It's a shepherd's purse. And what is the important indication of this drug? That patient says that, doctor, my alternate periods are very heavy. It's very strange. You cannot explain why alternate periods are heavy. And either a leukorrhea or a menses leaves a fast stain, something like a MAC group. She also has a huge fibroid, and with that, she has a lot of colicky, crampy pain. And with that, there is expulsion of clots, definitely because of the heavy menses, heavy menstruation cycle. The blood, which is excessive and which cannot flow easily, is going to clot. And she also has a sensation of a sore pain in womb on rising. So these are the very characteristic female symptoms. But just to tell you a little off bit about Thelespi bursa pastoris, it's also known as homeopathic catheter. And when will you use this? If the fibroid is very big and it is pressing onto the bladder, then she is going to have a retention of urine. And one of the other drug for homeopathic catheter is Solidago. These are the two drugs which are called as homeopathic catheters. One more thing of Thelespi bursa pastoris is, this is something not related with menorrhagia, but she has a galactoria from the right breast. That means there's a clear watery secretion from the right breast. So maybe you can think of fibroid and also having a problem with high levels of prolactin. Sometimes the prolactin levels they are very high, and that brings about galactoria in these patients. Anyway, so this is about Thelespi bursa pastoris. So bleeding is usually bright red with lot of clots, and definitely there's a fibroid uterus there. Another important drug that I have found very useful is Trillium pendulum. And mind well, when I give this organ remedy or when I give this specific remedy, I repeat it very often. Maybe every few hours that she needs to take 3 pills or lower potency, usually 30. That's the potency I use when it's a very acute or organ remedy. So 30 pills, 30 potency every 3 hourly, every 4 hourly. This is how I use in my practice. So Trillium pendulum, menstruation every 2 weeks. very profuse, bright red and gushing flow of blood. Patient is scared by the gushing flow of blood. And with that, there's so much of menorrhagia that she feels giddy, she feels dizzy, she feels faint, and a very peculiar sensation, as if the bones of hip, back, thighs are falling to pieces or they are forced apart. And this sensation is better when she ties a tight bandage. So when there is extreme dizziness or extreme flooding, which is bright red, causing it is the originated from fibroids, and that is the drug I think of is trillium pendulum. Another remedy is Ustiligo. It's also a fungus. But what is important here is a dark red bleeding, partly fluid and partly clotted. Does that remind you of any other drug? Belladonna is also partly fluid and partly clotted. But belladonna is hot blood, and belladonna is very congested, very irritable, very violent. And belladonna has a sudden shooting pains. These are the pains of belladonna are sudden in onset, sudden in regression. Another important drug is sabina, partly fluid and partly clotted. So how is it different from Ustiligo? Sabina is usually the bright red bleeding with dark red clots, while Ustiligo is dark red, which is half liquid and half clotted. Both are aggravated from slightest provocation. Both are good drug for fibroid uterus. But Sabina is when the uterus is not very bulky. But in Ustiligo, it's a bulky uterus, and Ustiligo is also used for post-delivery hemorrhages when the uterus is bulky and patient is still getting a lot of hemorrhages. Sabina is also like a homeopathic curate. Instead of using a curate to remove the products of conception or to use the curate to remove that excessive endometrial lining, you can use Sabina. Ustiligo, it's a good drug for climacteric as well as hemorrhages after abortion. When the cervix is spongy, uterus is bulky, and it is subinvoluted uterus. So hypertrophy of the uterus, cervix is spongy, and dark red bleeding with dark red clots from least motion is Ustiligo. Another drug which is aggravated from least motion, millefolium. But how will you differentiate millefolium from Ustiligo? Millefolium, the hemorrhages are bright red because the effect of millefolium is seen on capillaries. It's the one which controls the hemorrhages because of the overflooding of capillaries, or when the capillaries are highly flushed or they are engorged and the bleeding is because of the capillary is a causative factor, then you can think of millefolium. Another important thing of millefolium is it's a painless hemorrhage. Patient is bleeding. If you have seen कुछ कुछ होता है, I think so, yeah, where Rani Mukherjee is dying, and but she is very conscious. She's having bleeding. She has a postpartum hemorrhage. She's dying, but she's conscious. She's absolutely without anxiety. That's a millefolium. Bleeding without any uh, anxiety. If there's a lot of anxiety, belladonna, aconite could be thought of. Another drug, which is again a small remedy, Vinca minor. I've used in very few cases, but when there's a specific polyps, usually patients around menopause, perimenopause patient, they have metrorrhagia, that is bleeding between the two menstrual cycles. So if there's a case of metrorrhagia and she comes with a diagnosis, doctor, my gynecologist did my hysteroscopy and she found multiple polyps in the uterus, multiple polyps in the cervix, then that's the time I think of Vinca Myra. So that's for uterine cervical polyps, continuous hemorrhage. Another drug for polyps, of course, is Medurinum as a constitutional drug, Puja as a constitutional drug, but even Lidum is a good drug for polyps in the genital region. Another specific or rare drugs that I've used very few times, Cinnamonum. It's a common kitchen ingredient, but it is used when nothing works. Bright red bleeding with mental excitement. But when nothing works, but slightest motion and the patient starts flooding, that's when nothing works. I think of cinnamon. Erigeron, bright red bleeding with tenesmus of bladder and rectum. There's a constant urge to pass urine. And this is like a homeopathic hemostat. What is a homeopathic hemostat? A hemostat is an instrument which controls the bleeding. It's like an artery forceps. So the erigeron is sort of a homeopathic hemostat. It can control the bleeding. Sabina can control the tonicity of the blood vessels. Sickle can work on the smooth muscle fibers and brings about stoppage of bleeding. So you should know what is the basic pathology, how it brings about reduction in bleeding. So erigeron is when there is again bleeding from least motion. Most of these drugs, Sabina, Ustiligo, all millefolium, all have aggravation from least motion. But this drug is bright red bleeding with tenesmus of bladder and rectum. Next drug is again a common drug, hemamelis. It's a good drug for venous congestions. It's like Sicalcor. It has venous affinity. Like Carbovage, venous affinity. Passive, painless venous hemorrhage and soreness of the uterus or the parts on which it flows feel sore. Whether it is hemorrhoids, it's a piles, whether it is uterine hemorrhage or varicose veins of the vulval region, hemamelis is a very, very good drug. But what is important here is menses only during the daytime. There are many drugs like pulsatilla, like causticum, like coffea, where the bleeding is only during the daytime. But we have the opposite symptom also in some of the drugs. Menses only during night time. Bovista, MAC group, Amon group, these have menses only during night. So this is how is my approach. It's an obstetric and gynec case, good history, then you are lucky. Then the remedy is pretty clear. You give a constitutional remedy followed by intercurrent, followed by anti-miasmatic drug, and you can cure the patient. If there is a paucity of symptoms, then how do you go about it? You can prescribe on ailments from, you can prescribe on signs and symptoms, you can prescribe on pathology, you can prescribe on examination findings. As I was talking earlier in my lecture, there's a lot of wealth of information given in so many books of materia medica. They were all doctors in 1900. I'm fortunate to be in a place where Boric was having his hospital, very close to where we live. So they have wealth of information which is written down in the books. So when I used to see a patient, I used to find out whether do we have this symptom in materia medica. And so many times I've found this symptom in materia medica. So examination, you can give you the remedy from examination point of view. You have a diagnosis, then sometimes the remedy becomes very clear. And you can also prescribe when the patient comes with an investigation. Just to give you an example of a pregnancy bleeding, I'm sorry, am I going little fast or am I going beyond the time? Then I can stop. We can
No,
continue.
ma'am, it's okay. You can continue. No, ma'am, you can continue. It's okay.
Thank you.
We would like you to go to midnight.
I'm sorry, midnight.
We would like you to go to midnight, no problem. Everyone is like to.
You'll be asleep then. The talk will go on and you'll be asleep then.
So this is not college, ma'am. These are people who are very serious. They're very serious.
I know. I see that difference. Yes, I see the difference. Anyway,
so
just to give you an example, I think few more slides and I'll be done. So it's a case of pregnancy bleeding. So how I would have gone about it? And as I was just mentioning, I was fortunate that I could examine the patients and I could make the diagnosis and give the right homeopathic remedy. So it's a case of pregnancy bleeding. She comes in early months of pregnancy. Just for example, say 3rd month of pregnancy. She comes with the bleeding. So what is important to know whether this pregnancy is salvageable or not? Is it a viable pregnancy or not viable pregnancy? So how would you make out where the God or the physiology gives you hints. If the cervical os is closed, then it's a chance it's a threatened abortion. You can salvage this pregnancy. But if the cervical os has started to open up, that means whatever you do, this pregnancy is not salvageable. Just don't even try. That's the case when you require to go in for surgery. But if the os is closed, you have some chance to salvage this pregnancy. Now find out whether there was any causative factor for this bleeding, whether she underwent any acute stress, whether there was a fright or emotion, whether she was frightened, and you can think of opium, you can think of aconite, you can think of simicifuga, you can think of chamomilla. Or if she had any physical exertion, she fell down, she missed a step and the bleeding started, you have cinnamomum and arnica. You can also decide on the type of bleeding, as I was just describing: bright red bleeding and clots, dark red bleeding and clots, painless bleeding, painful bleeding, and accordingly you can think of a drug for that. So if it's a bright red bleeding, patient is very anxious, patient is running fever, or she looks very hot and flushed, then you can think of belladonna. If it is dark red and you feel the membrane is still intact, membrane is not yet ruptured, then the drug that I have found useful is Viburnum opulus. It's a very wonderful drug which can prevent prevent abortion, especially in second or third month of pregnancy. When the membranes are intact, she's getting a severe colicky crampy pain coming from back to the front, going down to the anterior group of muscles in thigh. And that is when Viburnum will definitely work. Again, low potency, frequently repeated. So the two most important symptoms in gynecology. You just master pain and master bleeding. Most of the cases of gynecology can be treated well. So if there's a pain, try to find out how is the direction of pain. As I just mentioned about Viburnum, another important drug for third month abortion, Sabina, where pain is from back to front. Pain is like a labor-like pain, colicky crampy pain. And she says that, doctor, only if I lie down flat on my back with my legs extended, that's how I feel better. So think of Sabina. It's a very good drug for third month abortion. If the uterus is very, very flabby, the os is still closed, but the uterus is very flabby and she has a habitual tendency for abortion, think of Colophilum. As I just mentioned, habitual abortions due to cervical incompetence, think of sepia. Habitual abortions with atony of the uterus, think of Colophilum. Habitual abortions due to syphilitic infection. A patient says that every time she conceives and she aborts. And sometimes they study the content of abortus and they find out if there is any congenital anomalies, there is a chromosomal anomalies, or if the uterus is septate, uterus is not grown well. One of the other specific remedy for preventing abortion is Rutania. And if she has a tendency for abortion because the uterus is infantile, uterus is not grown well, then you can think of a drug called Plumbum metallicum. So these are the different drugs that you can think of. On examination, if you find that the os is open, okay, this is not a homeopathic case, possibly she requires a surgery. If the os is closed, as we just mentioned, try Colophilum, Sabina, Belladonna, Viburnum opulus. If there is a cervicitis and there is a bleeding, it is not related to pregnancy at all. When you examine the patient just comes with bleeding PV, doesn't mean that there's something is wrong only with the pregnancy. It could be a local problem. It could be a local cervicitis. There's a cervical infection. Then the drug will definitely change. You're not going to think of Viburnum opulus. You're not going to think of Sabina because the problem is very local. So in that time, you will think of creosote. You'll think of nitric acid. You'll think of a locally acting remedy, Hydrastis, where there is a cervicitis, Calibicromicum. These are all the drugs for cervicitis. And rarely you'll find that the malignancy of the cervix, she is pregnant with cervical malignancy. and she comes with a bleeding, you thinking that it could be an obstetric bleeding, but turns out to be a cervical malignancy. Think of again drugs like carboanimalis, carboveg, creosote, arsenic. These are all the drugs for malignancy. So the bleeding is a presenting symptom, but you have to go to find out what exactly is the cause of bleeding. So examination is important because it defines the scope and limitation. You know when to interfere, you know when to take your hands off. It helps in diagnosis. Sometimes the gynec bleeding is taken as obstetric bleeding. Patient has come after 3 months of amenorrhea and she starts bleeding. Without doing a pregnancy test, you will not know whether it's a pregnancy-related hemorrhage or she had a 3 months of amenorrhea and it was a menstruation. Early malignancy can be detected if the patient is going for a regular checkups, or she comes with a bleeding PV and you find out, oh, there's a growth in the cervix. Maybe it's the malignancy. You take a biopsy and you confirm the diagnosis. Medico-legally, you would be safe. And it is always helpful in the research work. Now, this is also very important. Sometimes I give example when I teach about fibroids. Why examination is very, very important. Or even if you are not examining, you just find out from the patient's reports or from the gynecologist that their patient is going to. Where is the site of lesion? If it's a case of fibroid, whether the fibroid is on the uterus or inside the uterus. If the fibroid is a huge fibroid, if it is on the surface of the uterus, like a subserous fibroid, patient would be asymptomatic. Unless there's a pedicle and that pedicle goes into a torsion. But if it's a small fibroid, it could be just a 2 centimeter fibroid. If it is sitting into the uterine cavity, patient is going to have a lot of bleeding, patient is going to have a lot of pain. So the site of fibroid is important. So if it's a big fibroid sitting on the uterus, patient is 40, 45, asymptomatic, I said nothing doing. Just go ahead. You go into menopause, you're not going to have any problem. But if it's a 2 centimeter fibroid, she's in her 30s, is going to give her a problem. Because these fibroids are hormone dependent. They are dependent on estrogen. Till this patient is in a childbearing age group, till her body is going to secrete estrogen, this fibroid is going to grow. This fibroid is going to have a lot of blood supply around it. This is going to increase the surface area of the uterus. This is going to give her a problem. So the site and size of the fibroid is important. You have to try to find out what exactly is the pathology. Is it the endometriosis or it's an ovarian cyst? If it's a bleeding PV, as we just mentioned some time back, is it a cervical lesion? Is it an abortion? Is it a trauma? It's a malignancy or it's a foreign body? So when you examine, you have a very clarity of the thoughts, clarity of the mind. What are you treating and how is it going to help the patient? There are so many remedies, as I was mentioning in Boric and so many other gynecological and obstetrical textbook of therapeutics. There are very specific per abdominal findings, per vaginal findings, and even per speculum findings. You will be surprised. So just give an example. I think we'll call it a day today. It's a case of prolonged labor. I was fortunate enough to even observe labor and to give homeopathy in our hospital. Just to give an example, it's a patient of prolonged labor. She is in labor for almost now 12 hours, the primary patient. So when is belladonna indicated and when is gelsemium indicated? I'm not telling these are the only 2 drugs, but these are the 2 drugs with very specific examination finding, which is not my own, but it's all there in the books. So when you look for belladonna patient, if it's an elderly primary, then it's a belladonna remedy. It's a belladonna patient. If it's a multigravida, it could be a sickle cell patient. So what is the presentation of a belladonna patient? She is an elderly primary. She's going through the pregnancy for the first time. She's highly anxious. She's flushed. The pains are infrequent, or they are sudden in onset and sudden in regression. They come suddenly, they go away suddenly, but they do not bring about any progress of labor. On examination, the uterine contractions are infrequent, or in between the two uterine contractions is absolutely fine. And when you do a pervaginal examination, the cervix appears very hot and tender. Cervix is tightly closed, and there is a spasmodic contractions of the cervical muscles. I have seen this when you do examination of a patient who is in labor. She goes to 3 or 4 centimeters, and there's a sort of a cervical ring which develops. It's like the cervix is tightly holding your finger, and that's the indication of a belladonna patient. While just look at a Gelsemium patient, absolutely relaxed, dull, drowsy, in between the labor pains. If you have witnessed any obstetric patients and if you have witnessed the labor, I have seen so many patients, they just go off to sleep as if nothing is going wrong. These are the Gelsemium patients. So in between the patient, you can see them dozing off. There's a sensation as if instead of a fetus descending down with the labor pains, as if it is ascending up. Uterus appears absolutely relaxed because there are hardly any contractions. And when you do a pervaginal examination, cervix is either hard and unyielding, not allowing you to dilate the cervix, or it is like a soft, like a mud-like, very, very soft cervical lips. And membranes are bulging. You can see the membranes which are bulging, but there is no uterine contraction. So these are all the clinical tips which are there in our Materia Medica. We just have to search for it. Coming to the last 2 slides of our lecture today. So diagnosis can change your treatment. If it's an inevitable abortion, of course, you are going to go for dilatation and curettage. Whether it is a missed abortion, you are going to go for dilatation and curettage. But if it's a missed period, you are going to tell your patient to wait and watch. And the last thing is treatment on the basis of investigations. If the ultrasound shows it's a vanishing twins and patient is bleeding. Now, what is vanishing twins? She has possibly multiple pregnancy. Nowadays, you see a lot of patients with multiple pregnancy because of fertile. That's a fertomid, or it's a clomiphene citrate. That's a medicine which is given for hyperovulation. So a lot of patients come with multiple pregnancy, and uterus decides one fine day that she cannot, or the uterus cannot hold so many pregnancies, or the blood supply to one of the fetus is hampered, and that fetus starts disappearing. And when this fetus starts disappearing, there may be some amount of bleeding. So when on ultrasound, you realize that there is some sort of a bleeding, but the other fetus is fine. This fetus is sort of disappearing. What you need to do is just give arnica and wait and watch. Most of the time, nothing major will happen unless the uterus goes into contraction and wants to throw away that products of conception. So ultrasound is very important to know why there is a bleeding. What if it's a vesicular mole? Of course, the treatment will change. Even the homeopathic remedies will change. You'll think of Cantharis, you'll think of Sabina, you'll think of Natrum carb, you'll think of Cilicia. Those are the drugs for expelling the vesicular mole. What if it's a missed abortion? Ultrasound says, okay, pregnancy is supposed to be 12 weeks, but the fetus appears to be just developed till 8 weeks, and there is no heartbeat seen. It means the abortion has been already done. It means the body has stopped allowing that fetus to grow, and it has been missed. Of course, once the heartbeat is not there, the fetal pole is slowly about to be disappearing. You know, this pregnancy cannot be salvaged, and you have to go for DNC. If the patient comes with septate uterus, I've recently had a case of septate uterus, and because of the septate uterus, she was having repeated abortions. She got a septoplasty done, and now she's hoping that with the septoplasty done, she can go through the full-term pregnancy. But just being a septate uterus is a syphilitic miasmatic expression. So I've given a dose of syphilinum, and I'm hoping for the good results. And the last is whether the uterus is small. It is not a normal size uterus. If it is developmentally a very, very small uterus, it is not going to grow beyond a time. So for this condition, you can think of plumbum as a remedy. I'm not sure that after giving plumbum, the uterus is going to become a normal, but it's just a miasmatic or a blockage for this patient to go to the full term. Or maybe the uterus can grow till 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, and she may have a premature delivery. And for all those things, I think when you learn therapeutics, you must have learned 5 to 7 months is sepia, and then 8th month is pulsatilla, and the last month, that means a premature delivery, you can think of opium as a remedy. So this is in nutshell. I just wanted to share my experiences with you. These are all the ways in which I think when a patient of obstetric and gynec comes to me. So I hope it is informative to you, and I'm really thankful for Gaurang to give me a chance to speak to you all. And maybe in future we can have more session. We can take up some interesting cases, some easy cases, just to give you confidence that yes, even pulsatilla and sepia and calcarea, all these remedies also really work in obstetric and gynec case. So thank you everybody. Thank you Pratik for being there as a support. Thank you Gaurang, and thank you everybody for a patient listening. If you have any questions,